Is Dr. Jan Mangal, who is one of the experts in the field. He studied at the University of Edinburgh, and then he went to Oxford, where he got his doctorate. And he was an advisor to President Granger, if you remember. And he has had a career with major oil companies, working worldwide. And of course, he's based in Houston, Texas, where there's oil. So let us welcome now Dr. Jan Mangal.
Okay, get started. Forward, please. So this is a way that I visualize Guyana and oil. It's a marriage. It's a marriage between Guyana, which has its characters, its problems, its history, and oil, which also comes with a whole bunch of baggage, its own issues as well. Next, please. So let's look at some of the risk factors that Guyana is bringing to this marriage. Guyana gained independence in '66. Economic performance since then has been disappointing. No one can say Guyana has been a success story economically. You know, and when we consider the existing attributes, the gold, the forest, the people, it has been disappointing considering that wealth of natural resource. Then, as Tyrone spoke a bit there, we also have issues around our politics, which are mainly driven by race. And whenever that's the case, that's not optimal. That's suboptimal. And in countries like that, the country usually gets exploited because when people work their divisions and that's used against the people. There's a huge trust deficit in Guyana. Groups do not trust each other. Guyana also suffered bad leadership. So it's not like we had a leader that came along and tried to push Guyana forward on a national level. Our leadership has never really been one of national movement, or it's not with the support of the whole country. We've suffered dictatorship, we've suffered very corrupt officialdom. Still today, Guyana is quite a corrupt country. Another aspect we have to take into mind when we look at this marriage between oil and Guyana is the brain drain. The brain drain is to blame for a lot of what you see in Guyana today. It's happened over 53 years. Its effects are enormous and it will be very difficult to reverse. But that needs to be a focus. When we look at how we've dealt with resources in the past, meaning gold, it's not a success story. Many of our rivers are polluted. We don't manage that industry well. That's not a good sign for how we're going to manage oil. However, we've managed to maintain our green potential, meaning the forests, pretty much intact. And that's a very valuable thing that we've maintained as a country. Next slide, please. So we just spoke about Guyana. Now let's speak about the oil industry. What is the oil industry bringing to this marriage? What are some of the risk factors that oil is bringing to Guyana? And we have to recognize oil can be transformative. Look at Norway, look at these other countries. Oil has the potential to be hugely transformative, positively. However, as Tyrone mentioned, it's usually not the norm. We see many countries with oil that discover oil, that things actually go downward. Things become worse. The industry can actually worsen the situation mainly in weak and fragile countries with weak institutions. Countries with internal divisions like Guyana. Guyana is a perfect example of a country that has a high potential of being undermined by oil. That is why Guyana has to work even harder to make this oil, newfound oil, positively transformative, because we're coming with some issues. Oil itself has massive corruption scandals around it. Many oil companies, most of the big ones, if you go and look at their history, huge corruption scandals, billions of dollars. The resource thirst is a difficult thing to manage, even in well-run countries, as Taran mentioned. The large oil companies like Exxon, Chevron, these companies are powerful entities internationally. When you take on Exxon, you're not only taking on Exxon, you're possibly taking on part of the US. The same with BP. You know, they have powerful sovereign backers. And then we have some negative effects coming to the fore with oil, meaning climate change, sea level rise. These are real issues, and especially for Guyana, because we're below sea level. Next slide, please. So we looked at oil a bit in Guyana, and all of these mistakes from around the world, the countries with oil that made mistakes, we know what they are. They're well documented. There is no reason why we need to go and repeat those mistakes in Guyana. Guyana should be a test case to prove to the world that we can do oil that helps the people, that we could do oil in a way that benefits the country, that we do oil in a way that transforms Guyana positively. There's so much that's written about oil and how oil has ruined countries and all these best practices out there. We should be using those to ensure that we transform Guyana now. But sadly, we're already seeing some negative results. We're already seeing that we're not learning from all the evidence out there, that we're not doing our best to ensure that Guyana is positively transformed. So, with regard to oil, there are two aspects we need to focus on as a country. We need to focus on maximizing the revenue, meaning getting the most out of these contracts with oil companies. And then the second aspect, which is just as important, is once we get that money, we can't squander it. So we need to ensure we get the maximum available per international norms and benchmarks, which we're not doing right now. And once we have that money, which will be very difficult for us to do, is ensure we don't waste it. Look at major capital projects in Guyana, Skeldon, Amalia Hydro is probably going to be another disaster. Guyana has a long history of these huge projects that are white elephants. Guyana has a long history of squandering taxpayers' dollars. So, Taran spoke about large numbers, but even with those numbers, it is quite easily we could squander it all. Next slide. Now you can't see this, but this is just to stress that the oil is offshore, and it's in a few large blocks offshore. The standard block, which is, so this is Guyana here, this is the coastline, Venezuela, Suriname on the other side, and then way offshore we have the standard block. It runs from Suriname all the way to Venezuela, so it's a huge block. And then there's some major blocks around it. But when we talk about Exxon and oil in Guyana, we have to bear in mind that this oil is in one huge block. If it was one smaller block, it wouldn't be such an issue, because we will say, well, in the next block we will get a better deal. However, all of Guyana's oil could be in one block under one contract. That's why we talk about renegotiation. Next slide, please. These two slides here show the cash flow of the money that Guyana will get. You can't see it from the back. But what the red, so let me try and explain. This is the x-axis, so 0. And this is time, years, on the bottom. So initially, the oil company is spending a bunch of money. That's the red stuff on the bottom. Once the oil starts flowing at this point, then that positive cash flow, most of it is used to pay off what the oil company has spent. That's cost recovery. The government share is the the green, and Exxon and the foreign oil companies is the yellow. So what you see here is just for Liza 1, just the first project. So initially, in the first 5 years, Guyana will get about 300 million a year, if it's just one project. After about 5 years, so in about 2025, 26, then the government's share will jump to about 900 million. But it's not just one project. It will be a series of projects. Next slide, please. So what I do here, I show 3 projects, one after the next. And they're all about the same size, about 100, 120 barrels per day. So it's like a Liza 1 project superimposed on top of each other. So here's the spending for the first project, spending for the second project, spending for the third project. And what you see is because it is one big block, Exxon is allowed to cost recover the costs from the third project against the first project. So the cost recovery just increases and increases. And if there were smaller blocks as opposed to this one big Stafford block, then they wouldn't be allowed to do that because they have to do the economics on a block-by-block basis. But because this is one huge block and all the oil might be in there, we could end up having 5 or 10 projects in that one block. And the costs will all be deducted from your initial revenue. So the actual point at which the revenue increases to the country gets pushed out into the future. But when that revenue starts flowing, instead of the 900 million I spoke about, this will jump to about 3 billion a year. Now, what is $3 billion a year for Guyana? That's roughly just a bit less than the GDP, the whole economic structure of the country. So that's just to give you a feel of the money. Next slide, please. Now let's look at the contract for the Stabroek block. You know, it was said before that Guyana will get a lot of money. Yeah, we will get a lot of money. But when you do a business deal and you're desperate, you don't judge the success of your deal because of how desperate you are. You judge the success of your deal compared to other deals that other people are getting. This is a market. But Guyana is only getting 52% of the revenue that's generated in the Stabroek block. So when you run the economics over the 20-year life of the project, each of these projects, Guyana gets 52% and the foreign company gets the rest. Whilst if we go and look at, this is in West Africa, Shingweti, or maybe East Africa, if we look at Ghana, if we look at Guinea, if we look at LV Block 13, if we look at PNG, which is New Guinea, and numerous frontier areas around the world where oil was discovered, similar to Guyana, they are all getting between 63 and 72%. In Guyana, we are only getting 52%. So that's not acceptable. So we need to renegotiate the contract for Stabroek. Now, Exxon knows we're going to come and ask for more money. Exxon has money in the table. That's how all companies operate. They can't believe how well they've done so far. But I work for Chevron. We have contingencies for future events. Exxon will be the same. They know the government will change in Guyana, or something will happen in Guyana, and someone is going to come asking for money. They'll fight, but the money's there. So Guyana is perfectly justified to go and ask for a similar amount of the oil revenue that these similar countries are getting. Next slide, please. Now, you can't see this, so I'll just explain it. If we move from that 52% up to about 68% or 70%, so we increase the money coming to Guyana. If we do that, just on the first project, Liza 1, which is about 450 million barrels. Just in that first project, $2.6 billion will shift from Exxon to Guyana. And that is by raising the royalty from 2 to 10% and put in income tax or corporate tax of about 25%. Right now the tax is 0. So if we were to make those two changes, just royalty from 2 to 10 and putting in income tax, corporate tax, we would get an additional $2.6 billion on the first project. But remember, they're already, LISA 2 is already happening. Then there will be Payara. Then there'll be more projects and more projects. So if you extrapolate for all the oil that could be in the Stabroek Block, the estimates of how much money we are giving away to Exxon varies between $60 billion and $120 billion. So if you, and that is just moving the royalty from say 2 to 10 or 15 and putting in tax and making the contract more similar to other contracts in the world. If you apply those changes to the whole block and the extrapolated oil in the whole block, it's $60 billion US to $120 billion US dollars. So it's a lot of money. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the strategies that the oil companies employ with countries like Guyana. How do they work with countries like Guyana? And just a time check, how much?
You got 3 minutes.
3 minutes. So some of the strategies that our companies use. First of all, they try to bully with fear. They intimidate. Small country like Guyana, easy to intimidate. They make the notion of a renegotiation taboo. It is not. Countries always renegotiate. So why is it such a taboo? Why has it become such a taboo in Guyana? Because that's what our companies want people to think. They give the impression that we're powerful and we always get our way. That's what they try to tell countries like Guyana. Well, no. Guyana can do what it wants with up to a level of reasonableness. They also, our companies use their influence to convince the elites in Guyana and Guyanese that they're getting a fair deal when they're not. So there are reports put out that Guyana is getting a fair deal. But who's writing that report? A company that gets most of its work from Exxon, Wood Mackenzie. Rystad does the same. Who does Rystad get most of its work from around the world? Exxon Mobil. So we have to be careful about the data that's being put out telling us we're getting a good deal. Because if you follow those companies and money, you will see that it ties back to Exxon. Now, our companies try to reduce the visibility of Guyana, so to keep Guyana quiet. That's why one of my focuses from the start was interacting with international journalists, raising the visibility of Guyana. Up to recently, 2017, there were hardly any articles in Guyana. Nobody really knew about Guyana. Because our companies don't want the visibility, they don't want the rest of the world to realize how Guyana has been exploited. We need to raise the visibility of that. Also in Guyana, they use 3 levels of influence. First of all, they influence the politicians to get their own way. And that's very easy to do. They do it around the world. They're very good at it. Guyanese politicians are already influenced. Secondly, they influence the private sector. They give contracts. There were lawyers standing up criticizing Exxon at the start. They've gone quiet because they have contracts from Exxon. Right? So a lot of private sector in Guyana is scared to criticize Exxon because they're working indirectly or directly for Exxon. Then thirdly, they influence the people themselves. Influence civil society. There was a $10 million donation given to civil society in Guyana. That money now by Exxon is being plugged into all different civil society groups to keep people quiet. The next thing, I'm going to run over, is that okay?
Go ahead.
The next thing is, there's talk of direct disbursements to the people. Now, this meaning every year Guyanese can get a check based on oil. Now, this has a role to play, but not now. This is a way to convince, you think it's the government of Guyana doing that? Well, no, Exxon is behind it. Because Exxon does not want the people of Guyana objecting. Exxon wants the people of Guyana, oh yeah, you give me $500 a year, I'm quiet, even though you're taking 60 billion, right? So there's a risk with direct disbursements that they're being used to bribe the populace. Now, for the poorest of Guyanese, they need help, and they need help immediately. So there is a role there, but we have to be careful as well. Next slide, please. So now, strategies for Guyana. I just spoke about strategies for the oil companies that they use. Let's look at some strategies that Guyana should be using. Guyana should focus on maximizing the revenue and not squandering it. First of all, Starboard Block, then some other blocks, Kaishore, Kanji. And then also we need to focus on not squandering it. So it's institutional capacity, the sovereign wealth fund, things like that. We're doing some of that. We also need to recognize that our companies use haste, speed to their advantage. So Exxon came and said, well, yeah, we can bring on before the next election in 2020, and the government got very excited because they think, yeah, if oil flows before 2020, that'll help us win the next election. Well, what the government is doing there is already the resource curse, because the government is allowing itself to be influenced by oil to forfeit value. Because if you're in a rush, then you can't negotiate, right? If Guyana wanted to negotiate against Exxon, Guyana needs to take its time. So our companies use haste and a sense of rush. We need to rush. We need to do things quickly. Whilst Guyana should be saying, no, 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 let's take our time. We need to hire people. We need to develop our institutional capacity. We want to negotiate this well. Also, Guyana should leave the oil companies to do what they're good at. I know there are many Guyanese businessmen running around talking about, oh, well, we need 51% ownership Guyanese, or, you know, they're looking for ways that they could squeeze Exxon and these oil companies at every stage. Well, no. Let the oil companies do what they're good at. Let them do their business. Do not interfere. Create a very smooth and fair and transparent business environment. Streamline permitting. Let them move their people. Let them move their assets. It will help Guyana if they're efficient. But in many other countries, you see government entities trying to squeeze these oil companies. You know, well, that would not help. We should focus on generating the main income from the oil revenue itself, not from the operations. So when the oil is sold, Guyana gets a share of the revenue. We should take that and focus on using that for Guyana. Don't focus on refineries, going and building refineries, not at least for another 5 or 10 years. We don't have the capacity to do it. And the economics aren't there as well. We need to develop a clear legislative framework and strong institutional capacity. We don't have it. We don't have the institutions, we don't have the people. It's crazy to think that we could develop this oil, pump this oil, and get fair value when we don't have the people. We need to take ownership of data. When I say data, it's all the images and interpretation and analysis of the reservoirs and the oil. If we don't understand what's in the ground, we can't challenge Exxon. We don't have the data, we don't know how to interpret the data, we don't have computers, we don't have people. So when Exxon tells us something, we just have to go along with it. Like natural gas should be coming to Guyana now in a pipeline. It is not. Because Exxon is telling us, oh, it's not feasible. We also need to rescind some, in addition to the Starboard Block, which is a case of a renegotiation, we also need to rescind some very questionable awards. This is the Kanji and the Kaishore awards, which happened just before the last election. These blocks are huge blocks. They're just north of Starboard. in even deeper water, more challenging, complex environment. These blocks were awarded to the guy down the street. You don't do that. You don't go and award your oil blocks, which require companies with billions of dollars of assets and companies that pump oil around the world, to some guy down the street who has zero assets, who never pumped a barrel of oil in their life. But that is what the last administration did just before the election. That needs to be fixed. Because we cannot build a successful Guyana on corruption. Guyana can only be built on a solid foundation. To create that solid foundation, we need to go and rescind those two blocks, the Tanjore and Kaichur block. Next slide, please. So I mentioned about another strategy for Guyana, raising the visibility around the world, and this is where the diaspora comes in. You know, you guys can, you think about the US, Exxon, they're close, and the US is not going to help Guyana. Well, the US is not just Trump. There are many people in the US who would like to, in the US government and administration, who would like to see success in Guyana. So target them, try to influence them, your local Democratic or whatever representatives. Start talking to them about Guyana. And this is not about, say, going after Exxon. This is about just getting a fair deal so we can succeed. Because if we don't get a fair deal now in Guyana, in 5 or 10 years' time, people will react. People will wake up when they say, oops, we just lost $20 billion in the last 5 years. And you're going to get some crazy maverick politician rising up, and he's going to nationalize everything. We don't want to get there. We want to get to a more sustainable level. That's why we need to renegotiate. We need to tackle corruption now. We can also use the US stock market, because I believe Exxon and Hess are lying to the stock market now. And this happens in the industry all the time, their projections for production in Guyana are far too optimistic. They're technically they're too optimistic, politically as well. There's so much risk in Guyana that when Exxon say, oh yeah, in 5 years we're going to produce up to 1 million barrels a day. There are so many risks that will not happen. So when Hess tells that to the stock market, that's not right. That's not genuine. And with the SEC, that can be tackled. Then on those two blocks I mentioned, Kanji and Kaichur, Exxon, after these local companies in Guyana, people got these blocks, Exxon went and bought a share. Hess went and bought a share. Well, there are rules in the US against that. FCPA. You know, Exxon says it did the FCPA, and it passed these companies. It was okay to buy into Mid-Atlantic. It was okay to buy into Ratio. Well, no, that's probably not okay. These companies have zero assets. They have no production. Why is it okay to buy Exxon and Hess to buy into those companies? It's probably not. And I'm sure if you go and look at the FCPA, that's not a focus area. There are ways to challenge Exxon in the US. We also need, another strategy for Guyana is we cannot let the monopoly develop. We already have one company, being Exxon, with too much acreage. That's not good for Guyana. Look at how Norway developed their acreage. They made sure that different blocks have different operators. And in each block, you have about 3 major operators in it, because these guys keep an eye on each other. So in the Stafford block, we have Exxon, Hess, and CNOOC, the Chinese. But if we have 3 kind of equal companies, Exxon, BP, Shell, they're equal weight, they will interrogate each other's data. They will make sure the costs are not inflated. And in adjacent blocks, we need geographical diversity as well. We need European companies. We don't just want all American companies. Because we need to encourage diversity, and that's not going to happen by chance. We need to force it. Next slide, please. So this is probably more the political side or local side. Some strategies for Guyana. We really need to fix our pre-existing issues to make oil a success. We can't really take this oil and lump it onto what is Guyana and hope is going to work. All these issues we've had for 53 years will undermine the oil. We can't put oil on a shabby foundation. It's not going to work. So what are some of the ingredients? Transparency. Transparency is critical. All government contracts, processes, decisions need to be made public. And that would help with the trust deficit in Guyana. We need complete transparency of government in Guyana, open government. We need to focus on anti-corruption. Biggest risk to oil in Guyana, or anywhere in the world, is corruption. And it's highly complex. And we need to focus on that. We need to make politicians accountable. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm no expert in that, but that's a big issue in Guyana. We need to focus on issues and not people. So don't, when your party is in power, if they're not performing, you have to hold them to account. You can't say, oh, it's our guys in now. No, you've got to focus on the issues. If as voters and people you're not willing to focus on the issues, Guyana will go nowhere. We need to address the brain drain. Young people from UG, graduates from UG, first of all, we need to give them incentives to stay. Why are they still leaving even today? People are leaving. Why? Fix it. The public sector in Guyana is hugely inefficient. Sure, it was inefficient, and that is going through a lot of turmoil or transformation now. The public sector in Guyana as well is critical because we have all of this money coming in, and the public sector is going to be responsible for getting a lot of that money out to the people. And the public sector is inefficient and bloated. The public sector has to be streamlined and made more efficient. We also need to focus on natural gas, getting that gas pipeline to shore. There's no reason why we shouldn't have cheap and reliable electricity now. We can encourage a couple of Brazilian manufacturing factories from Manaus to come up. Each of those factories employ probably 5,000 to 10,000 people. We provide cheap electricity in the coast of Guyana. Those companies will come and set up on the coast. That's where we need to focus for the jobs. You know, in electricity, there's manufacturing will stimulate, building the new roads, bridges, hospitals. It's not in refineries and things like that. Next slide, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.